Folks, this is stunning. A MAGA Republican congressman just admitted on live TV that Elon Musk and Doge, quote, broke into the sensitive US Treasury databases, which include our social security numbers, home addresses, and other hypersensitive personal information, even as the Trump administration is pushing back on a court order forbidding Musk and Doge to access these systems, and former US Treasury secretaries are sounding the alarm. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we got something to look at here. This is a stunning admission by a sitting MAGA Republican congressman. I don't know why the hell he admitted this, but this took a bad situation for Musk, Doge, and Trump and made it 10,000 times worse. Here's the clip. Here's the admission.
What are these people, many of them young staffers without government experience, doing with my private information? I mean, as we know, that they've accessed private information about, for example, those who have received disaster relief and the DHS system. What can you tell us about that data, what they're doing with it, what they're accessing?
Yeah, well, first of all, they're not interested in anybody's particular private data because within these systems, they are payment systems of where money was going out, and they're gaining visibility and access to that. I will tell you that I strongly believe, that the request that they had, they were not receiving positive viewpoints on. People did not want to comply. So when they chose not to comply, they brought their own people in who broke into, so to speak, these databases and provided the information we needed, and the government people, computer programmers were shocked that it could happen.
So there you have it, folks. We have confirmation. And honestly, in previous quotes, Donald Trump suggested that this might be the case. He used some strange phrasing in previous videos and previous discussions about Doge's access to these treasury systems. You know, he would say things like, well, you know, our security is so low. This seems to be a confirmation from a sitting Republican congressman, a MAGA Republican, on House oversight, the congressional body which is supposed to oversee and regulate the executive branch, that the federal government refused to give Elon Musk and Doge access because they were not constitutionally and not, correctly given this sort of access. They weren't entitled to this sort of access. So government employees said, no, we can't let you into the most sensitive information in the United States Treasury. And according to this Republican congressman, Musk and his team broke into the databases. Holy shit. What an admission. What a shocking admission of recklessness and impulsiveness and a sense of entitlement from an unelected MAGA billionaire and his gaggle of college freshmen intruding seemingly unlawfully, if they had to break in, if they had to breach this information, to our most sensitive information. Stunning stuff. And of course, this comes on the heels of what we discussed yesterday, which is that a federal court has blocked Elon Musk and his Doge team from accessing this information and ordered them to eliminate any copies of information they may have made. A federal judge blocked the Elon Musk-led Department of Government Efficiency from accessing Treasury records with sensitive personal data in an order on Saturday. The order is the latest act from federal judges to temporarily restrain Donald Trump and Musk from using the Doge to access Americans' most personal data without restriction. The Saturday order responded to a suit from 19 Democratic attorneys general arguing that Doge, tasked with cutting federal spending, quote, is attempting to access government data to support initiatives to block federal funds from reaching certain disfavored beneficiaries. For instance, as the president prepares to attempt to shut down the Department of Education, Doge has been accessing student financial records. Obama appointee U.S. District Judge Paul Engelmeyer from Manhattan wrote in the order, quote, the court's firm assessment is that, for the reasons stated by the states, they will face irreparable harm in the absence of injunctive relief. So, there was a temporary pause, again, as we discussed yesterday in previous videos, including with practicing attorney, friend of the show, co-host of mine for Live and Learn, Pisco, that there was a temporary emergency block. And then there would be an opportunity for the Trump administration to respond and try to justify why Elon Musk and a bunch of college freshmen needs this most important, most sensitive information. Well, we now know that they have had a chance to make that case. Trump argues that courts cannot block Musk's team from Treasury systems. The president's lawyers have argued that the distinction between civil servants and political appointees was unworkable and unconstitutional. A hearing is set for Friday. Lawyers for the Trump administration argued late Sunday that a court order blocking Elon Musk's aide from entering the Treasury Department's payment and data systems impinged on the president's absolute power over the executive branch, which they argued the courts could not usurp. The filing by the administration came in response to a lawsuit filed Friday night by 19 attorneys general, led by New York's Letitia James, who'd won a temporary pause on Saturday. The lawsuit said the Trump administration's policy of allowing appointees and, quote, special government employees access to these systems, which contain sensitive information such as bank details and social security numbers, was unlawful. Members of Musk's so-called Department of Government Efficiency, which is not actually a department, have been combing through the databases to find expenditures to cut. The lawsuit says the initiative challenges the Constitution's separation of powers, under which Congress determines government spending. Again, Judge Engelmeyer on Saturday ordered any such officials who had been granted access to the system since January 20th to, quote, destroy any and all copies of material downloaded from the Treasury Department's records and systems. Judge Engelmeyer said in an emergency order that the officials' access heightened the risk of leaks and of the systems becoming more vulnerable than before to hacking. He set a hearing for the case on Friday. Federal lawyers defending Trump, as well as Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and the Treasury Department, called the order, quote, markedly overbroad and said the court should dismiss the injunction or at least modify his order. They argued that the order violated the Constitution by ignoring the separation of powers and severing the executive branch's right to appoint its own employees. The restriction, they wrote, quote, draws an impermissible and anti-constitutional distinction between civil servants and political appointees working in the Treasury Department. The filing followed warning shots over the weekend. Vice President J.D. Vance declared the courts and judges aren't allowed, quote, to control the executive's legitimate power, although American courts have long engaged in the practice of judicial review. And that's important. Remember, as we discussed, J.D. Vance is perfectly content for federal judges, for the Supreme Court everywhere, for a federal judge in Texas, for conservative judges elsewhere to strike down, for example, the Biden administration's executive orders and the Biden administration's interpretation of legitimate power. Basically, J.D. Vance's perspective is the courts can and should suppress Democratic administrations and crack down on Democratic administrations, but they're supposed to give a blank check to Republican administrations. On Saturday, Trump called the ruling by Judge Engelmeyer a disgrace and said that no judge, frankly, should be allowed to make that kind of decision. So again, they are pushing back on this idea. They are pushing back and saying, no. Elon Musk and his, again, gaggle of college freshmen should be given a blank check and unfettered access to the United States Treasury because they have the tacit permission of the president. But again, we also have this admission from Republican Congressman Pete Sessions that actually, no, Doge broke into. Doge was denied access by correctly duly appointed officials within the federal government, within the Treasury Department, saying, no, you don't have the authority to just access everything you want. And so rather than going back to Donald Trump or Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent to hash this out, according to the MAGA Republican congressman, they just broke into it. They just broke into this shit. On top of it, I just want to say that there was also an op-ed released this morning by 5 former U.S. Treasury secretaries saying our democracy is under siege. When we had the honor of being sworn in as the 70th, 71st, 75th, 76th, and 78th Secretaries of the Treasury, we took an oath to support and defend the U.S. Constitution. Our roles were multifaceted. We sought to develop a sound policy to advance the president's agenda and represent the economic interests of the United States on the world stage. But in doing that, we recognized that our most fundamental responsibility was the faithful execution of the laws and the Constitution of the United States. We were fortunate that during our 10 years in office, no effort was made to unlawfully undermine the nation's financial commitments. Regrettably, recent reporting gives substantial cause for concern that such efforts are underway today. The nation's payment system has historically been operated by a very small group of nonpartisan career civil servants. In recent days, that norm has been upended, and the roles of these nonpartisan officials have been compromised by political actors from the so-called Department of Government Efficiency. One has been appointed Fiscal Assistant Secretary, a post that for the prior 8 decades has been reserved exclusively for civil servants to ensure impartiality and public confidence in the handling and payment of federal funds. These political actors have not been subject to the same rigorous ethics rules as civil servants, and one has explicitly retained his role in a private company, creating at best the appearance of financial conflicts of interest. They lack training and experience to handle private, personal data, like social security numbers and bank account information. Their power subjects America's payment systems and the highly sensitive data within it to the risk of exposure, potentially to our adversaries. And our critical infrastructure is at risk of failure if the code that underwrites it is not handled with due care. That's why a federal judge this past weekend blocked, at least temporarily, these individuals from the Treasury payment system, noting the risk of irreparable harm. While significant data privacy, cybersecurity, and national security threats are gravely concerning, the constitutional issues are perhaps even more alarming. We take the extraordinary step of writing this piece because we are alarmed about the risks of arbitrary and capricious political control of federal payments, which would be unlawful and corrosive to our democracy. A key component of the rule of law is the executive branch's commitment to respect Congress's power of the purse. The legislative branch has the sole authority to pass laws that determine where and how federal dollars should be spent. The role of the Treasury Department, and of the executive branch more broadly, is not to make determinations about which promises of federal funding made by Congress it will keep and which it will not. As conservative, Justice Brett Kavanaugh of the Supreme Court previously wrote, quote, even the president does not have the unilateral authority to refuse to spend the funds. Conservative Chief Justice John Roberts agrees. He wrote that, quote, no area seems more clearly the province of Congress than the power of the purse. During our collective 18 years at the helm of the Treasury, we were never asked to stop congressionally appropriated funds from being paid out in full. Not since the Nixon administration has this type of executive action been contemplated. At that time, the Supreme Court ruled unanimously that the president did not have the power to withhold federal funds that Congress has authorized. The Trump administration may seek to change the law and alter what spending Congress appropriates, as administrations before it have done as well. And should the law change, it will be the role of the executive branch to execute those changes. But it is not for the Treasury Department or the administration to decide which of our congressionally approved commitments to fulfill and which to cast aside. No Treasury Secretary in his or her first weeks in office should be put in the position where it's necessary to reassure the nation and the world of the integrity of our payment systems or our commitment to make good on our financial obligations. Secretary Scott Bessent has had to do just that, and we were comforted to see the agency commit to Congress that any recent access to the Treasury's payment systems, quote, is not resulting in the suspension or rejection of any payment instructions submitted to the federal government. When he has been asked repeatedly if Treasury has tried to block any federal payments, he has stated unequivocally that, quote, we have not. We hope this commitment stands. It's how the framers intended it when they designed a government with checks and balances that gave the executive branch a host of powers, but provided for elected members of Congress and Congress alone the authority to levy taxes and spend federal funds. Many people and entities depend on the Treasury's faithful disbursement of federal funds. Social Security checks arrive each month. Veterans receive their benefits. Medicare providers are reimbursed. Federal workers, members of the military, and businesses that provide goods and services to the government are to all be paid on time and in full. Holders of outstanding federal debt receive interest payments. People often rely on these funds for survival, making any risk of their cutoff or delay existential. But even more than the importance of making good on particular commitments is the importance of making good on the principles that this country stands for. We have, during our service in the Treasury Department, faced moments of crisis when the specter of an American default loomed. Any hint of the selective suspension of congressionally authorized payments will be a breach of trust and ultimately a form of default. And our credibility, once lost, will prove difficult to regain. That's from five former Treasury secretaries. So there you have it, folks. A US congressman, a MAGA Republican congressman, admitted that Elon Musk and Doge broke into the most important sensitive information you and I have. Conservative, progressive, liberal, it doesn't matter. He broke into it. And now the Trump administration is desperately trying to defend that breach and say that, no, Elon Musk, an unelected MAGA billionaire whose popularity shrinks each day, should be given unfettered access to your most sensitive information. And then you have actual experts, people who have infinitely greater expertise in running the Treasury than Elon Musk, saying that this is absolutely dangerous. That's where we are. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.